Dr. Laura Froyen has her PhD in human development and family studies with specialization in couple and family therapy. Laura combines trauma-informed practices with the latest in child development research to help families find more peace, calm, and connection. She teaches conscious parenting and communication with heaping dose of grace and compassion through her podcast, The Balanced Parent, and her courses and programs. Dr. Froyen, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let's see here. Where should we start? How about we start with what trauma is? How can a parent recognize that there is trauma involved early on in life?
So my favorite definition of trauma comes from Gabor Mate. He defines trauma as not what happens to you, but what happens inside of you because of what happened to you. And so that's a very broad description. There's lots of things that can be traumatic. Birth can be traumatic for both the parent giving birth and the child who's being birthed. There's things that will be traumatic, like a car accident for one person, and for the next person, it won't be traumatic at all. And a lot of that has to do with how our nervous systems are set up, how we respond to those things, and how we go about completing the stress response cycle. So one of the biggest traumas that most of us face is daily chronic stress. And that puts a lot of load on our nervous system. It really narrows our window of tolerance, kind of what we can handle well. It impacts our development when we're young. It impacts our aging when we're old. So I don't know, that's kind of a broad answer. Is that good?
That is absolutely amazing. I wanted to take us back so the parents can understand what is actually happening inside. What is that happening inside that is creating a potential for lowering our resilience, lowering our adaptability, dysregulating our nervous system, therefore showing outside as inability to age well, or maybe stumping the child's development or creating gaps in development. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so for children especially, they're right from the moment they're born, their brains are in the process of being built. And that's a process that will take the next 24 to 26 years of their lives. And those early years are really important. A lot of the very basics of human survival are in place when they're born. We're very instinctual and driven a lot by reflexes. And then as the brain matures and other parts of it start coming online, children go from being other regulated, where, when we have babies, we have to take care of meeting all of their needs. They can't regulate their own body temperature. Their breathing sometimes gets dysregulated. That's why they like to sleep next to us. Because we help their heart rate stay steady and stuff. And so kids spend the first 5 years of their lives going from being other regulated to being self-regulated. And that's a bottom-up kind of brain process. And so when there's a lot of stress happening, when the basic needs aren't being met, the brain, of course, is going to focus on some of the basic of survival. And the extra stuff, the fine motor skills, the really nice, flexible neuron proliferation should be happening during the early years, all of those things kind of take a back seat to kind of primary survival needs. And so for young children, experiencing stress or experiencing trauma can really put them, I don't love behind. It can impact their ability, kind of their potential. And so the other thing to remember is that kids are naturally quite resilient. The human species is a quite resilient species. We're made to be adaptable, and we develop certain protective mechanisms to kind of keep ourselves feeling safe.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. No, sorry. I feel like the other thing that impacts kind of how we cope with and how we respond to difficult things and to stressors has a lot to do with the story we tell ourselves, our internal working models of ourselves and others, how we make sense of what's happening to us. And that's something that actually parents can be really impactful in.
Do we have-
Hello.
Hi, Muhammad.
Hi, thank you for being here. Let's see here. With regards to the protective mechanism, yes, we can create a lot of protective mechanisms. However, are they really a benefit to the overall formation of executive function? So can we talk a little bit about that?
Can you say that question just in a little bit of a different way? So I have just a little bit.
Sure. When I talk to my parents with regards to the development, we can actually find deflected patterns that we can cope with the world, with our environment, with how we engage and connect. Therefore, that's what's kind of coming up as a behavior or our lack of socialization skill or an ability to learn. So how do these patterns in deflected pattern of development and not following the healthy trajectory of development are really impacting our executive function or opening or recruiting of the prefrontal cortex?
Gosh, I feel like that's a really big and deep question. And I'm not sure I have a completely clear answer, but I think one of the things that we need to be thinking about is that when young children are learning about their environment, we have a really robust system to protect themselves, right? And to make sense of what's going on. The attachment system is the primary bond that that children are building, and it's through that system that they start having kind of the ability to safely explore the world or kind of putting up walls around themselves internally. And I think that, when it comes to the protective mechanisms that they put into place to keep themselves feeling safe. So like if an attachment figure can't really be relied upon to provide them comfort, they will do things like push away or not seek out comfort. And they'll start learning things about themselves, like it's not okay for me to show distress because that makes my parent angry. And so I need to hide those things. And then they start to learn to suppress their feelings and their emotions. And of course, we know as humans, we're meant to be emotionally expressive. We're meant to get those things out of our body. And so when we're keeping things in, it can really impact the ability for our brain to function. And one of the things that's helpful to think about the brain as it's coming online is thinking about it in 3 levels. So there's the primal brain, then there's the limbic system, the more emotional brain, and then there's the executive brain. And if a child is kind of stuck in that limbic system, they're not feeling safe, they're not feeling love, it's really hard for those executive brain functions to come online. I don't know if that gets at what we were looking for.
Absolutely, I think so. So how do we encourage parents to create a safe and loving environment? What does that mean in the moment when a child is throwing a tantrum and you want to tell him, please shut up because you are triggering something in me, as opposed to actually hugging them and saying, I love you? How does that actually create those patterns you talked about that perhaps take the child away from, well, I cannot depend on my parent to actually express my emotions from now on, so I'm going to shut down?
Yeah. Okay. So there's 2 pathways that parents have to walk when working on this with their kids. One pathway is walking alongside the child, and one pathway is walking alongside themselves. So if something your child is doing is triggering you, when they're having their big feelings, when they're expressing displeasure or defiance, because kids do these things, if that's bringing up a big, somewhat
Only kids?
Yeah, what?
Only kids?
I mean, grown-ups too, right? I mean, yeah, absolutely. But if that's bringing up something big in you, that's a clue that there's some work to do there. The truth is that honestly, most of us did not get any support growing up on how to regulate our emotions. And regulate your emotions does not mean stuff. So I'm not talking about gripping, white knuckling it through and, like you're really mad at him for throwing a fit over the, that his cupcake doesn't have enough frosting on it. And you really want to be like, you ungrateful child, like, and you maybe heard your own parents say that when you felt a little disappointed in the amount of frosting or the amount of chocolate chips in a cookie you got. And then white knuckling is kind of shoving that down. Oh, sweetie, you're so sad about that frosting. It's like kind of that really like holding on versus being able to say, I can see that you're really upset about the frosting. I'm upset too, and I need a moment for myself. Going off, this is the conscious parenting part, recognizing when you need a moment, going to yourself and soothing yourself first, not white knuckling it through, but getting in touch with that little 5-year-old who's still inside you, who's very worried about your son, who is maybe going to get yelled at the way you were. But the little 5-year-old in us doesn't know that there's a different mom or a different dad in town, right? So they're very worried about this little 5-year-old, and they want this little 5-year-old outside, your son, to stop complaining because they're gonna get yelled at, they're gonna lose love, right? And so our inner children get really activated and worried about the little children that we're raising. And so they need a little soothing. They need us to come to them and say, oh, I know when you were a kid and you wanted the bigger cookie, you got called selfish and that hurt. And you don't want our little baby, our little sweet 5-year-old to be rejected in that way. Don't worry, that's not what's going to happen. Okay. Now you just watch, you listen. I'm going to go and I'm going to help my 5-year-old. All right, hey buddy, wow, you got a cupcake and it looks really yummy, but your sister got one that had more frosting. Oh, and now you're looking at your sisters and you're seeing her with that frosting on your face, and that's really hard because you wanted that cupcake. Oh, buddy, I'm so sorry. And that's what it is. Like it's this 2-pronged process, and it's hard. And when you're first starting out, if this was never modeled for you and you never experienced this as a child, that's going to happen. That's going to start in a therapy room with a therapist. You're going to say like, okay, buddy, we're going to kind of put a pin in the frosting and I'm going to go journal, or you're going to write it down on a note on your phone and talk about it with your therapist later, right? Because you can't happen in the moment right away. That takes a lot of practice. But eventually you will be able to do it. And eventually you'll be able to do it so seamlessly that your little inner 5-year-old will listen as you do it just right off the bat to your 5-year-old. You're on the outside. And so, that's something that I'm talking about inner child work, which is kind of advanced, but it's easy to do. It's accessible. We all know that feeling of having a little inner 10-year-old having a or 2-year-old having a temper tantrum, or a little inner tween who's like, how dare you talk to me like that? We all know those feelings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that, so one of this model of the brain comes from Dr. Becky Bailey's conscious discipline model, which I love. And if you're looking for a model to learn about the brain from, it's wonderful. But so she describes these 3 levels of the brain: the primal brain, the survival brain, the emotional brain, the limbic system, and then the executive brain, the prefrontal cortex. And it's really helpful for me to think about the way that she structures that these 3 levels of the brain each have a question. The survival brain wants to know, am I safe? So if your kid is in the middle of a tantrum, they're yelling hateful things, they're kicking and screaming, they are in their primal brain, and all they need to know right then at that moment in time is, am I safe? And so we have to figure out how to communicate safety to that child. Then they'll be able to move up the brain into the emotional brain. This is when kids after a tantrum soften and kind of collapse into you. You can feel that. And then they're asking, am I loved? And that's when we show them, yes, you're loved unconditionally, no matter how big and angry you just were. That was scary, and I'm here. And then once they're kind of settled in that limbic brain, that emotional brain, then they can move up into that prefrontal cortex, that executive brain, where they can ask the question, what can I learn? And we parents, we want to teach our kids lessons. It's imperative that we do. This is our job, right? They do have to learn how to go out into the world and be good citizens. So we jump to the what can I learn while kids are still in am I safe? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what we do. We want, they
Absolutely.
have to learn right now. They don't. They absolutely don't. And not even so much that they don't, they actually literally can't. Because when we're in our primal brain, our flight or fight system is turned on. Our blood is rushing to our extremities so that we can run fast or fight strong. And the higher order brain is literally turned off and inaccessible. They cannot process language. They often do not know what they're saying. They'll just go, and kids, I feel like I'm talking a whole lot. I'm so sorry. I'm a super big nerd about this
You're
stuff.
doing amazing. I'm like,
Okay.
talk more, talk
Okay,
more.
So, I mean, and so one of the other things that's really important to understand too is that when they're in this place and they're triggered, they literally can't hear you. They can't process words, and they might say some really hurtful things. But as kids age, fight or flight starts moving from the fight mechanism. Younger kids will hit, kick, bite, older kids will start fighting socially. So around 4 or 5 is when you're going to start hearing like, you're stupid, I hate you, that type of language. And you have to remember, like, because that can be really hard for a parent to hear. You have to remember that that's just like a 2-year-old hitting you. And the only thing you need to respond with is, I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to help you not hurt me. I know you don't mean those things, just really keep it calm, keep it safe. Because again, you're communicating that safety. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I guess we can answer this. What are the different structures involved in survival versus emotional brain?
Oh gosh, well, we can get really granular with the brain if we want to, but I think one of the things, Courtney, and feel free to clarify your question. I mean, one of the big kind of structures in the primal brain we think of as the amygdala. It's where kind of some of our primary deep kind of anger and run, generally because I think the survival and emotional being similar. Yeah. So they're kind of two separate levels. So in the primal brain, we talk about, that's kind of where the brain stem is and where the midbrain is. So the brainstem is responsible for taking in sensory input and regulating it. It's responsible for your heart rate, regulating your body temperature and your breathing. Then the midbrain, which is still part of that kind of primal brain, is responsible for your kind of triggering your fight or flight system. There's also freeze, fawn, and fall and faint. Those are all kind of things that can happen that the midbrain is controlling, and it's very primal. And then the next level up, the limbic system, is really where language processing happens. So your lower order brain is bringing in the sensations, right? But the processing is happening at the next level up. And that's why sometimes it seems like kids are completely out of touch when they're having a meltdown, like they can't hear you, and that's because they literally can't. Okay, yeah, good. I got there. Yay.
You did. Thank you for that. One of the things that stood out at me is that, again, our children are not bad. They're not doing anything on purpose. We truly have to understand the brain in order to actually understand what their needs are. And it's not difficult, to understand. There's a lot of, like you said, granular stuff that goes in there, but there's still things that parents can learn and really adapt to and embrace as my child's behavior is actually just inefficiency in the way the brain is recruiting and processing and responding to stress.
Absolutely. And that story that we tell ourselves is so important and so difficult to change in the moment of a trigger, right? And so recruiting compassion for our child can be really hard when we're triggered ourselves, right? And so, I mean, if we think about this too in terms of nervous systems, we have a child's nervous system. It's very underdeveloped, still very open and available to influence from other nervous systems, right? So this is where co-regulation comes in. Then we've got the adult nervous system, who's also dysregulated because we're triggered, right? Or trying to pretend that we're not, white knuckling through it, right? And so then there's 2 really dysregulated nervous systems that are just dysregulated together. And that's like, we can really ramp it up with each other. Co-regulation we think of as such a good thing, but like there can be co-dysregulation too, where we are ramping, getting angry together. And so really learning, I mean, really it's about us more than it's about the kids at all. It's really about learning about our bodies, our nervous systems. When we've been irrationally angry, just flooded with that red flush of anger, we feel out of control, we feel ashamed, I mean, I've had that experience. I feel awful afterwards. I feel depleted and exhausted, and I know what's happening to me. And these little kids, they don't know. So when our kids are having some of their worst behaviors is really when they need the most love and understanding and compassion from us, because they really are doing the very best that they can. Having our human biology just take over and run away with the ship is a scary thing. And so a lot of these kids who have some of the hardest times really need our compassion. They really need our kindness and understanding.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those words. That means absolutely everything. And I think a lot of people can resonate with it. Now, the one thing that I would like to talk about is a little bit of that inner child work, because without that work, some of these questions are going to be difficult to answer, right? And are going to be difficult to swallow and adapt to and embrace as our own right now. So how do we start? How do we start inner work, child?
Yeah. Well, one of the easiest things that I like to do is to have my clients find a picture of themselves at each of their children's ages. And whether that is, a physical picture that you could hold, I keep mine on my computer screen, but I also take a picture of it and have it saved in an album on my phone. So I can just look at them and get to know who I was at those ages, because your children will uniquely trigger you kind of based on the age that they are now. My oldest is 10 and my youngest is 8 right now. And the things that they bring up in me, the work that they invite me to do, is radically different at 8 and 10 than it was when they were 2 and 5, and so keeping that updated for yourself is one of the easiest ways. So just kind of getting in touch. And then the next easy, like dip your toe in, is the next time you're feeling overwhelmed by emotions or really really just frustrated or flooded with something that you don't quite understand why you're upset as you are, just ask yourself, how old am I? Just inside, how old am I? A number will appear and your skeptical brain is going to want to judge it and think like, oh, that can't be right. Like what, but don't, just let the number emerge and then write it down and let it go, but get curious about it. What was going on for me at that age? How is what's happening now similar to what was happening for me then? And it's just kind of dipping a toe in. And, the other thing that some people who've had really difficult upbringings, really hard times, it can be really scary to think about going back into the past. And what's beautiful about inner child work is if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can stay in the here and now with your inner children. So if you've got an inner 13-year-old who is mad at her parents because she didn't get the freedoms and the autonomy that she needed, you can give that to her in the here and now. You can go inside and be like, oh man, yeah, it's hard to see my 3-year-old daughter, having more ability to state her opinion than you did when you were 13. That's really hard. And you don't have to go back at all. You can just be in the moment with what they're bringing up, and learning to validate yourself, learning to talk to yourself, to comfort yourself. That's called remothering or reparenting. And it's a beautiful thing a beautiful relationship to develop with yourself. We have a chance for a second childhood, not by going back in the past, but by in the here and now showing up for ourselves in the way that we didn't need to, or that we didn't get that we needed.
I love that opportunity for a second childhood. I love that. I mean, based on what I've learned so far in my career and having the experience over the 4 or 5 years that I've been doing this work, for me, I think parenting is reparenting, which is that invitation to have a second childhood. And really, I think it's important to recognize that our parents did the best they could, but sometimes that was not enough. And I think we have an opportunity to really grow into the people that we're meant to be, and really turn inwards to what we have and how we can live our lives.
Absolutely. And you know what's beautiful about that too, is that there's this invitation in that message that you just said to accept and release any expectation for what's going to happen for our kids. We are going to do the best that we can. We are going to heal what we can, trying our best not to pass on generational, intergenerational trauma. And there will be things that we get wrong. There will be mistakes. There will be things that land, on our kids in a way we never intended that cause harm. And they will have their own work to do, not because we're bad parents, but because we're human beings and we're in a relationship. Parenting is a relationship. There's two individual souls, spirits, engaging and connecting. And yes, one is younger and one is older, but it's a relationship. And we can't control what happens and the outcome with the other person, right? Because they're their own person. The moment we try to control it all, that's not a relationship anymore, or not a healthy one. And so there's this piece of understanding that what happened to me maybe wasn't okay. And at the same time, they were doing the best that they can. I'm going to make these changes and show up as my best self. And my child might have feelings about that when they grow older. They might have work that is theirs to do. And being there, being willing to kind of step into that arena with them, acknowledge them, validate them. I have one parent, I have both of my parents are living. I have one parent who's willing to step in that arena with me, and one parent who's not. And I got to tell you, my relationship with the one who is one of the most beautiful and deep relationships in my life. I'm so grateful for that parent. And the other one is what it is, because they're not in the place to do that work. And that's too bad. But the healing that's happening between the one parent and me, it's going to reverberate through the generations of our family. It's the legacy that she and I are working together to build for my family, for my kids. And that's a beautiful thing. And so we'll be in that position one day, not too long from now, 20 years from now, we'll be in that place. And we got to be willing and ready. And the practice, the learning starts now, right? It starts now. And our kids, when our kids confront us with, I don't like that rule, that's not fair. It's so easy to get defensive, but we could soften.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I love that. What a way to finish. What a way to finish. We have 3 more minutes. I want to be respectful of your time. How can our audience get in touch with you? We did talk about the Balanced Parent podcast, correct? The Balanced Parent podcast.
Yeah.
How else can they get in touch with you? And what are your last parting words for this summit? But we will be talking more.
Well, okay. So yes, the Balanced Parent podcast is where I do a lot of my work. I have great interviews on there and great solo episodes. My website is out there. I do have a membership community. So if you liked hanging out with me, I would love to have you in there, and so you can get your questions answered and get support. I think the parting thought really is, whether it's with me or with Dr. Alex, but wherever you go to get your support, where you find someone, find a mentor, find a home for a parenting home for yourself. Because we don't just know how to do this stuff. Yes, we've got wonderful instincts as parents. We can trust ourselves, but there's a lot of information out there, and it's very hard to learn a deep and intense skill like parenting without a mentor. So wherever you find your mentors, like you find your teachers, dive in, whether it's with me, with Dr. Alex, with, you know, books that you love reading, dive in and don't be afraid to get that support. It doesn't mean anything about your abilities as a parent. I get my own support, you know, so I support parents, and I get my own support from professionals that I work with. And because I can help other people with their kids all the time, but my kids are their own special thing because they're mine and they trigger me, you know, and so we all have the work to do. And it's really important to be brave and to know that needing help with learning something doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It actually means you're doing it right. So the sport's out there. We're so lucky to have people like Dr. Alex, you know, and so lean in wherever you can.
Absolutely. Dr. Laura, what an absolute pleasure this has been for me, and I'm sure for the parents listening and being part of this summit. I am looking forward to continuing these conversations with you, and I am so pleased that you were able to actually join us. Thank you for your time, and see you soon.
Okay, absolutely. See you soon.
Bye.
Great.